Welcome to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Weekly is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation and MyBookie.ag. So if you want to bet on the fights this weekend, you got a lot of big underdogs I'm sure John Einreinhofer will tell us about in a little bit. You can go to www.thegruelingtruth.net. Click the banner. It'll take you there to get you signed up with a 50% bonus up to $3,000. I'm your host for the weekly boxing show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my co-host. First up, Jeremiah Preisser.
Good evening, everyone. Excited to be on. I'm always excited to talk boxing with you guys. Let's get it going.
All right, and next up, of course, the aforementioned John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Mike, good to be here. It's good that we've got frequency of boxing activity at this point, and we're rolling with 2018, and we got stuff to talk about, so ready to go.
Yeah, we're going to start off. We got 3 fights to talk about this weekend, and 2 of them I think are, for better words, a joke. We'll start off first up. We've got Jorge Linares will defend his portion of the lightweight title against Mercito Gesta. And your guess is as good as mine why he gets a number 1 ranking and gets a shot to win a title. He's 31-1. When I look at this, I mean, the competition he's fought is not very good. He had a loss to Miguel Vasquez, lost a unanimous decision to him. So he has fought some guys that are, all right. But when I look at this, John, there's no way this guy should be fighting Linares for the title. And I know Linares is making a lot of money fighting overseas, which has made it easier for him. And if he wouldn't have been doing that and had fought better competition, I'm sorry, Luke Campbell, Anthony Crolla, to me, neither one of them do anything for me. So this is just another in a line of guys that are no-hopers against him.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, Mike. Crolla was better where the odds were a little closer on that one. But this guess on paper is a joke. Minus 4,000 favorite for Linares on the MyBookie AG. And, then HBO buying this stuff from Golden Boy. They've got to, they press Top Rank. I think that was the thing to do. And they got to do the same with Golden Boy. This to me is along the lines of what Top Rank was giving them, which caused them to break their relationship with Top Rank. And I think we're going to have a theme tonight. It starts with this Gesta Linares fight about the alphabets being as big of a joke as ever with the fights that they're trying to make, and anybody this Belts Matter crowd that wants to try to justify these things. I mean, are you justifying Gesta and Linares? I mean, come on. That's got no business being on HBO. Guest is 30 years old. And, we've talked about other guys that have to produce. Linares did knock Luke Campbell down. But one thing I will look, as you reference with his recent fights, Mike, Linares has got it's lightweight. It's not, let's say he's not a middleweight or light heavyweight or heavy. But, he's not a flyweight or a bantamweight either. He's got to start handling these guys with more authority. He didn't put any hurt on Crolla in 2 fights. He dropped Campbell, but then Campbell went the distance with him, and Campbell hadn't been tested. And despite a solid record, Campbell had been considered a little bit of a disappointment in his career up to that point. So, let's hold Linares to the same standard that we're holding people like, or at least I am, and I'll admit to, people like Robert Easter to, talking about Danny Garcia coming up against Brandon Rios. Linares has got to get this guy out of there. I mean, he doesn't just, it's not content. It's not good enough for him to just box 12 rounds with this guy. He's a minus 4,000 favorite. He should be getting this guy out of there quickly. And if he doesn't, that's a mark against him. But the fight really doesn't bring anything much to the table. One thing to everybody's credit, transnational, the ring. And again, this is why you got to look at the legitimate ratings. Nobody's got this the guy in the top 10, even in 17 divisions. And fans really need to look at this because why is something like this on premium cable?
Yeah, I mean, it's a joke. I mean, let's face it, with the competition at Easter and, Linares' face, Jeremiah, they might as well just fight each other and get this over with and get one of them out of the way because I'm tired of watching this crap.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's, Easter has been unimpressive, and I want to come to Linares' defense just a little bit. I mean, Krolla was considered, I think, number 3 by the ring when he fought him the first time, and I think he was still considered maybe top 5 in the rematch. The rematch was unwarranted, though. But the thing about it, and back to John's point about the alphabet soup organizations, so is it an oddity? I mean, is this just a coincidence that Eddie Hearn, 4 fights in a row, or maybe it's not 4 fights in a row, but in this short span of time, Jorge Linares is fighting Eddie Hearn guys, right? So he has Kevin Mitchell, he has Anthony Krolla twice, and he has Luke Campbell. I mean, that's no coincidence. It's just like the WBO rubbing elbows with Bob Arum. This is one of those cases as well. And Linares plays along because he makes good money there. But no, Gesta, I remember the fight with Vazquez, and Vazquez was one of those spoilers, where he moves around the ring a lot. He pity-pat punches. He doesn't really try to get you out of there. I think some of us watched the fight with Bay, the Mayweather fighter, and just how horrid that fight was. But yeah, Linares has got to get him out of there. I mean, Gesta is not on that level. And, Linares has to prove a point. I mean, after watching Robert Easter, and not only that, the fight that many of us are clamoring for is a potential matchup with Mikey Garcia. And if we're going to have that later this year, Linares is going to have to give us something to work with. We realize time and time again, that your result ultimately helps your ticket sales. So if you're going to get guests out of there, go ahead and do it. Be done with it, and let's focus on the bigger fights down the road. Because honestly, even a fight with Linares and Robert Easter, it's not that appealing after watching Easter struggle, arguably lose 3 of his last 4 fights. Against Comey, against Shafikov, and against Fortuna. So Linares has got to get him out of there. But to Linares' credit, he has been fighting better competition than Easter, and he has looked better. He's just got to stop carrying the guys.
Yeah, and then next up, we got a 35-year-old Lucas Matisse against Tiwa Karam. Not even sure how you say their name. He's 38-0. The thing that worries me in this fight, when I first look at it, is when you look at the guys that Karam has faced. I mean, he's faced them all in his home country. There's really, if you look at it, his fight before this, he beat a dude that was in his professional debut. The fight before that, he beat a guy that was 18-14-4. Just a year and a half ago, he beats a guy that's 22-19, 25-14. There is no way he should be in the top 10, much less fighting for, the vacant WBA World Welterweight title. So once again,
let me correct you for 1 second, Mike, and you're going to laugh. No, his last fight was against the South African guy with 11 losses, and the guy dropped him. In the
the pro debut guy was the guy before that, wasn't he? Okay,
that was the guy before that was the pro debut. Okay.
Yeah, so
you forgot about the guy with 11 losses that dropped him.
Yeah, but that guy also had 22 wins. So, but when I look at this, Jeremiah, this is a bigger joke than Gesta getting a shot. I mean, this just gets dumber as we continue to talk about it.
Well, this isn't, it's the whole title aspect of it's just BS anyways. I mean, it's WBA's regular title. So, a title that, nobody should pay any mind to at all. It matters little in terms of title relevance, but I've seen some of Karam's fights, and you can watch a lot of it because they've got specific channels dedicated to Thai fighting on YouTube, and he looks like a solid fighter. He doesn't look like a bad fighter, but then again, of course,
the competition
it's hard to put it
now.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's hard to put it into context. He does look like he has a little power. I'm not going to write off his chances altogether, only because Matisse he's been beaten on a number of times, and he's I believe 35 years old. So I'm not putting it outside Karam's chances of upsetting the Golden Boy's apple cart here, but you would think that this is intended to move Matisse into something bigger, and what that would be, I don't know. Where does Matisse fit in, even if he does score a devastating knockout? Because Matisse, like we're well aware of, the power seems to be the last thing to go, and Matisse certainly got that. But it's like, where does he go from here? I mean, if he holds some BS regular trinkets, and we know how the WBA are, they don't necessarily make you. They don't give you mandatories for the regular title, so. And they don't always make you fight the super, quote unquote, super champion. So, I don't really know what it's going to mean. Granted, he wins. Keith Thurman holds their trinket right now. Does he get a shot at Keith Thurman down the road? I don't know. Al Heyman and Golden Boy aren't really playing ball together, at least not very much. So I don't know. I don't know what the win means, but I'm going to favor him here. But again, I'm not going to put it outside Karam's chances to upset Matisse here.
Well, this is the thing, though. I don't either. My problem with the whole thing is that he's even getting a shot for whatever this made-up title is. He doesn't deserve it. It is, I think, set up to maybe later on feed Matisse to a Spence, a Crawford, or a Thurman. It's a safe fight for whoever takes him, just because it's not safe in the fact that Matisse can punch. But he's 35 years old. And he didn't fight at all in 2016. Emmanuel Taylor's the only guy he's fought in the last 2 years. And before that, if you go to 2015, he went life and death with Provodnikov, and then he loses to Victor Postol. So when I look at it, that's my problem. I do think that there is some intrigue here that we don't really know about Karam, and we know about Matisse and how old he is. But I still see Matisse stopping him at some point in this fight, John.
Yeah, I'm kind of along the same lines as you guys. I'm with. Well, first let's look at it. Matisse is a minus 1130 favorite on MyBookie AG, so he's actually significantly less of a favorite than Linares. And that's probably because, again, the odds makers have to know, and even though they're not exposed to Karam particularly much, again, it's their job. They have to know. Karam's 25 years old. I agree with Jeremiah. I was making fun of him getting dropped by the 11-loss guy in his last fight, but he doesn't look that bad. I watched that fight today. He's only 25 years old. I think that's a strength here, and that's where Matisse could, dare I say, it could be in some potential trouble here. He's 35 years old. Matisse, he's only 5'6.5". I agree with Jeremiah. In boxing, power's the last to go. I do anticipate that Matisse will bring in the big bomb he always has here. I think that's probably still there. But this Karam looks relatively quick. He looks like he punches with a little bit of authority. He doesn't look like he bangs real hard, but it doesn't look like he's got nothing there. And, if he can, it's typical. Of course, that's a big if, but, because he hasn't been in with anybody compared to Matisse, who has been in with people, as we know, a lot of people. If he can not get caught, you would figure he's probably going to out-volume Matisse. You probably start with that there because he's only 25 years old and he looks pretty quick. So he'll, you saw Matisse against Postol with a guy taller than him, getting hit at will and really just folding like an accordion in that fight. And Karam's 5'9", so he's going to also have a height advantage here. So, despite the odds here, you can never ignore what the odds makers say going in. You would think that this might be a fight that Karam's got a shot, but I agree with both of you about, where does this go? But I think we're actually crediting these promoters with being a little overly ambitious. I think the game is becoming apparent, and it's actually worse than what we think. I don't think they're looking at Matisse fighting anybody of note. I think what they're doing, as long as they can fool a decent amount of boxing fans, which it amazes me, but somehow they're able to, they'll put an alphabet belt on it, and then Matisse will be fighting 3 more guys like Karam on HBO After Dark until he finally gets too old and gets knocked out or something, and they'll be calling him WBA title fights. And they'll just expect fans to buy in and continue to try to fool them, and I don't think it leads to anything. I think that's why the fans have to draw the line on these kind of fights. I think that I'm starting to see a little bit of an awakening with some people involved in boxing along the lines of, you heard Paulie Malignaggi mention it on the Showtime telecast last week. I think there's and I've seen a couple more references to this. I think it's this. There's gradually becoming a realization that, for boxers to make the money they want to make, we're realizing that there's only so many TV dates available where you can do that for all these guys. In other words, there just aren't that many. So, we talk about the inactivity. Part of it's also because of that, because there's only so many TV dates. The guys want to get paid a certain amount, so they're only going to step in there, on those dates where they can make that money. Now, why I mention that is, if there's only going to be a limited number of TV dates, which there obviously is between Showtime, HBO, ESPN, U.S. TV money still drives the sport, even internationally when you take it as a whole. We can't have fights on TV dates like Gesta Linares and Matisse and Karam. I mean, even if Matisse Karam surprises us, ends up being a better fight than expected, it still doesn't justify it. In other words, if there's only X amount of TV dates per year that are available, the fight's got to be good, because there's just not enough TV dates to go around. So these TV dates have to be made worthwhile. We can't waste TV dates with these fights like we're talking about.
Right.
All right.
And
go ahead.
I want to add something real quick. The reason why I give Karam a little bit of a chance is not only because of his youth and his height, but since Matisse has folded mentally before, and he's 35 years old, the breaking point is generally smaller for those type of fighters. So that's sort of why, if the younger man, he just happens to outspeed him, he works that jab, because we've known that a guy with a good jab, can outbox Matisse. I just think if a younger guy who's quicker can stick to the jab, a guy who's taller, for Matisse, it's just he's already been at that point. So again, the bar is just set a little bit lower. So it's just easier to, fold his hand up. I'm hoping that's not the case. I've actually been a fan of Matisse for a long time, so I'm hoping he pulls it off here.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much what me and John are saying. Our problem is the fight should not be on premium cable. Correct, John? I got you right there?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, that is definitely my position on this.
The next fight is the one I would rather see on premium cable. It's a lot more deserving than the other two we talked about. But we've got these semifinals, the World Boxing Champion, or what do they call it? The World Boxing Series semifinal between Alexander Usyk and Briedis. To me, I know John doesn't think this is a really risky fight for Usyk, and I think Usyk will win the fight. But Usyk's last time out against Marco Huck, he beat an old Huck, TKO'd him. Of course, Briedis won a unanimous decision, I believe, over him last year. When we look at this fight, let's look at it this way. You got Gassiev fighting against Dorticos, and you've got Usyk fighting Briedis. So we'll just start off here. Jeremiah, which one of these two, Usyk or Gassiev, do you think has the tougher fight?
Well, I think it's tough, because I think Dorticos has looked pretty damn good. But if I'm going by resume, I'd probably go with Briedis here. I mean, Briedis has actually been fighting at a fairly high level for a little while now.
Yeah, he beat Mike Perez, too, which was a solid win.
Yeah, I mean, Perez actually looked pretty good in his first fight at cruiserweight. But I thought he looked good. I mean, the fight wasn't particularly interesting. I mean, Briedis was able to outbox him. There wasn't a lot of guns. Wasn't a lot of mudslinging there.
Hey,
the
plus, wait a second. I got to get this in because I want to be the one that says it. He also beat the heavyweight champion, Manuel Charr.
By knockout, And by
knockout. He knocked him out.
Well, no, it was. Have either of you seen the knockout to that fight? It was a vicious knockout.
I know, that's what I mean. So he's knocked out the heavyweight champion, so I don't know how this fight couldn't be competitive.
Yeah, right. I mean, he knocked out a guy who equaled or damn near equaled Max Schmeling's feat of winning a heavyweight title. I mean, this is how serious this is, folks. So tune in, adjust your listening, and I mean, this is Char is a joke. I mean, this is when you're getting blitzed, and I think Briedis was I don't even think he was 215 pounds in that fight. I don't have the record up at the moment, but yeah, I mean, he was blitzed. I think it was a right uppercut that he ran into and fell right through the ropes. Not quite like a Hasim Rahman type thing where he went all the way over the apron, but it was one of those things where he fell through the ropes and he was done out cold. But it's in looking at their resumes, I think Briedis is slightly better than Dorticos. Dorticos, if I remember correctly, his two best wins were against Kalinga, who I think stopped Kudryashov and then was stopped in the rematch, and then he stopped Kudryashov, who's a vicious puncher, but is, basic in his approach. I mean, he puts the earmuffs on, he comes at you, he throws punches, not really a combination guy. He tries to get you out of there with one shot. So I don't think there's much of a difference between Briedis and Dorticos. So I think the fights are fairly even. I don't think there's a big gap between Briedis and Usyk and Dorticos and Gassiev. If anything, it's because Usyk, I think, to me, is a little bit more in the spotlight than Gassiev is, so more people are favoring him. But I think it's a competitive fight. I mean, I like what I've seen from Briedis so far. He doesn't look like a world beater to me, but he's going to be competitive in this fight. It's just I don't think he has the ring IQ to hang with a guy like Usyk. Usyk in his short career has not looked phenomenal, but he has shown the ability to adjust. So in his fight with the cruiserweight, who didn't have that many fights, he could be aggressive, and his chin looks okay. But when he needs to box a little bit, he can do that too. His power is pretty good. He can box well if he wants to. He's defensively slick when he wants to be. He just has more tools than Briedis does. But Briedis is a good puncher. He showed a little boxing ability against Perez, but he can whack if he needs to. And back to the knockout I talked about before. But it's a good fight, and I'm excited about it. I just wish that the World Boxing Super Series had American TV dates because, I've liked what I've seen so far. I mean, the presentation has been really good. They've got this big bombastic intros and lighting shows that accompany the fights and the fighters, and they do a good job on social media. I mean, if you follow Ringstar Sports or the World Boxing Super Series on social media, they're very active. They've got people who are constantly interviewing people, constantly doing this, constantly doing that, and the presentation has been great, and I'm sure the Europeans are loving it. I just wish we were getting more of that in the States, but I'm going to favor Usyk here. I think he's going to outbox him fairly clearly, and I'm hoping to get that Gassiev-Usyk fight in the finals.
Yeah, and I think, John, when we look at this, and we always talk about you got to be impressive, but if you're a cruiserweight and you want to be taken seriously going for a heavyweight title, I mean, Usyk needs to start being a lot more dominant than what he has been his last few fights.
That's the way I see it too. I think Usyk is good, but I didn't like the way he particularly looked against Hunter and Machunga. Those two fights kind of stick out to me. That didn't like the way he looked that much. Now he's a minus 800 favorite over Briedis, and it's minus 245 that it doesn't even get to the end of the 10th round. So, that's on the MyBookie AG. I know MyBookie AG doesn't have a line on Gassiev and Dorticos, but I've seen that on other sports books, and that fight is close to even money with Gassiev as a slight favorite. I think you could argue about the resumes, but I think you have to project a little bit too. And Dorticos has looked good. He's looked sharp. He's 6'3". He's the more dangerous opponent. I think Gassiev and Dorticos is a very, very interesting fight. I don't give Briedis much of a chance against Usyk, and I think Usyk is kind of a slapper, and I don't like that for projecting the heavyweight. Where you really need the power as a heavyweight. I like that he's talking about moving up. I think it's the right thing. I think it's the right thing for the top, really what I think will be the top three guys in this tournament. Usyk, Dorticos, and Gassiev. That all those guys move up. I'd hope to see. I mean, let's face it. There's bigger money there. There's more attention. Anybody who's been very, very good at cruiserweight has been capable of fighting at heavyweight. So, and even in the last 30 years, there's been top light heavyweights that have done it, like Michael Moore and Michael Spinks. So, it is certainly not too much to ask, even in this era. And Usyk 6'3", Gassiev 6'3", Dorticos is 6'3". These guys can do that, and especially Gassiev, who's younger, he's going to fill out even more. So I don't think Usyk's going to have much trouble in this. Briedis, he hasn't impressed me that much. He does arguably have a better resume than Dorticos, but I don't think it matters in terms of abilities. I think Dorticos is the better fighter. He's got a better amateur pedigree. And, Briedis has got the fight in Latvia. It's in Riga, so it's in his home turf. Of course, Ukraine is right there as well. I don't anticipate that's really going to make any difference. Briedis, he did do enough to beat Perez, but I wasn't particularly impressed with the performance. I think, Perez passed his best and dropping a lot of weight. Wasn't impressed by the performance, frankly. So I just, based on what I've seen that and overall, I don't think he's going to provide much of a test for Usyk. I think though the fight to watch is Gassiev Dorticos, where you've got two big punchers in a fight that's just about even money. That's coming up at the beginning of February. That's going to be over in Russia. That's the one that's got me the most interested. I don't anticipate Usyk having much of a problem in this one.
All right, next up, we're going to go ahead. We're going to look at a little bit of boxing news. So we might as well continue our theme here. We'll call it Pablo Baez night for me and John, right, John? Errol Spence.
I like the Pablo Baez theme.
Yeah, it seems that one of these alphabet organizations, I would mention who it was, but I don't really care because they're all the same to me and they're junk, has ordered Errol Spence, his title defense, to be against Carlos Ocampo. I don't know if that name's right or not, and I don't really care. When I looked up Carlos Ocampo, there's nothing he's ever done to remotely be a mandatory contender for Errol Spence. And when I look at this fight, I mean, Spence only fought once last year. And I know John's brought up he needs to fight 3 times. But I would like if one of these next 2 times is against somebody that is at least a legitimate top 10 contender. But I will tell you this, John, and I think you agree from me from talking to you before the show, I can live with this fight if it's on network TV, because when you look at the numbers that Showtime got for Spence and Peterson, I mean, the numbers were 637,000, which is not good if you're trying to build Errol Spence into a superstar. And I think a lot of the problems here are Spence is not Sugar Ray Leonard in a press conference. I mean, him and Peterson were boring. Spence is not real outspoken, doesn't really run his mouth. And when I look at this, I think Errol Spence needs to be on network TV if they want to have any chance of building this.
Well, no, I think that was where PBC was headed in the right direction, and I give Al Heyman credit for trying. I think all 3 of us have been fair there. We're not in the PBC hate club. I think we just call it like we see it. And, what he was trying to do was the right thing. In other words, like you said, Mike, even if it's a lesser opponent, at least get, network TV. The fans don't have to pay for it. Put those fights out there and, try to get some good ones mixed in as well, which they did. And, get where more eyeballs are seeing these guys to give them a chance to be stars. I think it's more that than the personalities and things like that. Boxing just doesn't get enough exposure to enough eyeballs where people can be made a star, and I think that's, frankly, what even happens to guys like
you get a lot of those eyeballs, John, just if you got somebody running his mouth at a press conference, something stupid happens, and all of a sudden it's on ESPN or your local news.
I know. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but what I'm saying there, my argument is that, guys like in that sense, and look, when you think of how many people box, think of how very few it's been. Manny Pacquiao got to that level some. Floyd Mayweather. I mean, look, even as popular as Canelo Alvarez is, and he doesn't really do anything wrong, so to speak. He's popular with a lot of Mexican and Mexican-American fans, but his popularity is not that widespread otherwise. And there's no reason with him except for the fact that he doesn't speak English, but Roberto Duran didn't, that he couldn't develop more of a following. So there's just not, look at a guy like Joe Smith, who had a great story, knocked out, really a guy that will end up being a legend in Bernard Hopkins, even though he was old, but, had a great knockout of Fonfara on national network TV. And he doesn't get any momentum built up, and he ends up fighting a tough Sullivan Barrera in a fight that goes on about midnight on the East Coast. But how do you remedy that? What we started this talking about. You got to get on network TV. You got to get more eyeballs seeing you. And I think you hit it on the head, really. That's the problem. Showtime does not even have the subscribers that HBO does. And if you follow boxing, you kind of need to know the business part of this. So on Showtime, there's just a max out. So you made a good point. So Errol Spence, he fights Peterson on Showtime. 630,000 people see him. It's just not going to do it. When he fought after the U.S. Olympic basketball final, when he fought Bundu, he got seen by like 6.3 million people. Now, you just need more. One time doesn't do it. You need to keep it going, keep getting seen by more people like that. And obviously where PBC ran into trouble, they're not going to say it, but it was obviously financial, where they had to go back to Showtime and get the money that Showtime was giving them, because they couldn't sustain the time buys anymore. But the idea was good about getting these guys seen, trying to make them into stars. And yeah, I'd still like to just see, frankly, competitive fights. I think even now they should be shooting a little higher. I think somebody as good as Errol Spence, I think in the summer it should be, as good as he is. To me, Peterson was the easy one already. It should be Danny Garcia or Sean Porter, and then it should be Keith Thurman in November or December. For the way it's gotten to nowadays, it'll be a year for the ages for him, and I don't see why that shouldn't be the case. Fighting this alphabet contender guy in between, it's good that he fights 3 times, but Peterson in the alphabet contender, to me, for a guy as good as Errol Spence, and the odds will reflect that, those are just about gimmies. He's got to be in shape. He's got to not make a mistake. And Peterson's a good fighter. He's had a good career, but it's just the mismatch in talent to me with as good as Errol Spence is. And think how bad it is with this alphabet guy. Again, fans need to look at this stuff. This guy's not in the ring top 10. He's not in the transnational top 10. That's ranking 17 divisions. Just fans, just people who follow the sport, just look. Forget the alphabet rankings. Just look what you're being fed. I don't see really what it does. But Mike, you make a decent point that, all right, if he were to blow the guy out on network TV, where you weren't asking the fans to pay for it, and you said, hey,
remember this,
fight,
John. Floyd Mayweather is probably the last big American star. And the thing about Mayweather is, I remember watching him on free TV in his first 10 fights a few times. And we saw him in the Olympics. He got screwed into the decision. But you saw him when he was younger. I mean, the only guy that's really turned into a huge pay-per-view star, I mean, the world over, is Manny Pacquiao without that. I mean, Canelo has to a point, but not to a point like Mayweather and Pacquiao.
No, as good as Canelo is, and, he's still got some time to go, especially if he wins the fight with Golovkin in the rematch. But I agree with you. I think the handwriting's on the wall that as good as he is, and his numbers are better than everybody else right now, but that he's not going to reach those kind of numbers to sustain those kind of events. So
yeah, and remember this. Roberto Duran was on Free American TV. Julio Cesar Chavez was on Free American TV. I remember watching him knock out Roger Mayweather the first time on it. I remember him beating Rocky Lockridge on free TV. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, whether you speak English or not, is just having American viewers see you.
Well, we already have the evidence of that, because, the evidence that people, in the industry who follow, and if you look back at articles from 20 years ago, you'll see this written by people, who follow the industry or in the boxing industry. You had Larry Holmes and George Foreman coming back, guys who had just fought on American free TV the way boxing used to be, coming then into quote unquote more of this current era. You're going back a little over 20 years now, but they would get huge ratings when they fought on USA, because everybody knew who they were. And then when their fights went to pay-per-view, they would get huge buys because everybody knew who these guys were.
Yeah, but everybody knew who they were fighting, too, because everybody knew Holyfield from the Olympics, and he was on free TV. All these guys were. I think we're just kind of beating a dead horse now, because this is obvious what needs to happen, but I think it's obvious that it's never going to happen the way it did 30 years ago.
Well, yeah.
No, but at least Al Heyman understood that there was an effort that needed to be made for that to happen. But again, just the way the industry is so carved up, all the problems you got to deal with, all the hurdles, the complications, it just became impossible to implement it.
Hey, John, this is the part of the show where me and you just hogged like 10 minutes and completely forgot about Jeremiah. So, Jeremiah, what do you have to say?
We got to give Jeremiah 15 minutes back now.
Well, every show, there's like a 10-minute dead spot where Jeremiah could go like take a dump, eat dinner, let the dogs out, and come back, and me and you are still talking.
Yeah,
he might have just done that. He might have just done that, Mike, and you didn't realize it.
No, I actually just went and took a shower. So what are we talking about? No, I'm kidding.
The same thing we were when you left.
Okay, so we're talking about TV time, right? That's what we're talking about. Okay. No, but you guys are absolutely right. And the funny thing is it goes back to these belts matter guys too. You know, guys like Rick Glazer and Steve Kim. I don't care. I just name names now because it doesn't matter. I've been at it with them before on social media. So it's instead of asking guys to fight more, asking them to fight the best. What they're doing, instead of stacking cards, right? Instead of giving us a pay-per-view, which is actually worth buying, Bob Arum's recent pay-per-views are indicative of this. Instead of doing things which it seems like the layman can understand, just make the best fight the best. Instead, they're trying to supplement these things with belts. Like, okay, just throw a title on them and it'll sell well. We can remedy this problem if you just eliminate, all the titles, but one in each division, and let the best fight the best, and stack the damn cards. I mean, it's not that hard to understand. Actually, like Rick Glazer, I told him, that all the sanctioning bodies should be eliminated, and he was like, "Well, how are people supposed to make money if you get rid of the belts?" I'm like, "Well, how did they do it 50 years ago? How is this possible?"
Right.
You look at some of the. I mean, it's easily doable. I mean, how do you think the UFC made so much headway so fast? I mean, why would Dana White, if he thought that was the best strategy? If he thought that was the best platform, the best structure to use, why did he not do it? Why did he stick with 8 divisions and 1 champion per? Because it's obvious, right? He just stacks the damn cards. He has 1 champion per. We have somebody to relate to, and it's simple enough, right? But instead you got guys like, oh, well, if we throw a WBO Oriental Continental regular belt in there, throw a belt, give these guys trophies, and people are going to buy tickets. And listen, just make the damn fights, and you've got to keep these guys active, right? The thing about Spence as well is when you have him demolishing guys, it's great. I mean, a lot of fans jump on board. I mean, you see all the social media buzz immediately after the fight, and some of it, it's making me a little crazy because now he's destroying De La Hoya, and he's destroying, he's being pitted against Canelo Alvarez already.
Leonard.
Oh, God. Yeah, and I'm just like, just pump the brakes a little bit, okay? The performance was awesome. I like it, but you got to keep, even guys like Lamont Peterson, you got to keep their opponents busy too, right? I mean, it's not just, it's all good and well to watch Errol Spence demolish a guy like Lamont Peterson, who's a good all-around fighter. And even if you're ranking in 8 divisions, he's a borderline fringe contender type, right? But you got to keep the opponents busy too. You got to keep all these guys busy, because what happens is when I said it last show, and I can't remember who said it, but I think it was some famous line from a trainer. But if you rest, you rust, right? Keeping Lamont Peterson on a diet of David Avanesian for a year and a half is not going to do it. Even if you keep the foes busy, you keep them in the limelight, and we recognize these guys, and there's a little more pep to the sales and whatnot. But yeah, the viewership just wasn't that good. But if they plan on keeping Spence busy, they're going to give him 3 fights this year. Ocampo is not, it's not what I want to see. And I think Errol Spence is he'd probably fight whomever in the summer. He's just like, I think there was, I forget who put a mic in his face recently, but they were like, oh, would you fight Danny Garcia in the summer? He's like, go ask Danny Garcia. I'll fight Danny Garcia.
Yeah.
I mean, Danny Garcia, realistically, Danny Garcia should whip Brandon Rios' butt, and then he could potentially be available in the summer. And I don't think anybody would be against Danny. I mean, seeing what Danny Garcia has done in recent years, I don't think any of us would mind that at all. I mean, let's go watch Errol Spence, beat up on Danny Garcia and then get Keith Thurman at the end of the year. I think that would be perfect. I'd love to see that, but
that's never going to happen.
It's not. No, it's not going to happen.
You'll be lucky if he fights one of them at the end of the year. Maybe you get Danny Garcia at the end of the year. Then he fights another guy like Ocampo, like March or April. And at the end of that year, maybe you get Thurman.
Yeah, I mean, in today's boxing, that's possible. But I do think, I am hopeful that we will get Keith Thurman and Errol Spence at the end of the year. And that's the fight we all want to see. I mean, that's kind of where it's at in the welterweight division. Terrence Crawford is going to be next in line. We recognize that Terrence Crawford has to be down the line somewhere.
Well, he's got to beat a welterweight first.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's, a lot of us expect him to, beat Jeff Horn. He does that in impressive fashion. He gets one of top ranked welterweights. I don't even know who they have anymore. I don't know if I actually wouldn't be surprised if Bob Arum puts Manny Pacquiao against Terrence Crawford.
Well, and that could kind of transition to what I was going to bring up, which was your man crush on Lomachenko. There was some talk about him fighting Pacquiao, and I think there's no doubt that Pacquiao is going to be fed to one of these two guys just to finish up the career so Bob Arum can cash out on him. I would hope that Pacquiao would fight Lomachenko instead of Crawford because Lomachenko will beat him and probably beat him badly. But I think Crawford could really hurt him.
Well, that brings me up, reminds me of the most annoying bit of boxing news that I've heard in the last week, and it fits with everything we've been talking about, including these fights. Dan Raphael posted something last week where I ended up debating with him on Twitter about it, and he was trying to defend it, basically just taking a company line as far as I'm concerned. But apparently they've now revealed to us, which despite what Dan was saying, Top Rank never talked about this through ESPN. All they talked about when this ESPN deal started was, we've got to bring boxing back to the fans on basic cable and get it exposed. Well, we know that was really just because they got kicked off of HBO. But now it has been revealed last week that there will be an ESPN pay-per-view, which they are talking about the first outing of it being that Pacquiao will fight somebody like Mike Alvarado on the undercard, and Crawford will fight Horn, and that will shift to pay-per-view. Now, as far as I'm concerned, those are double mismatches. So we're getting right back to where these guys were on HBO, just trying to fleece the fans with throwing fights on the pay-per-view, and HBO wouldn't tolerate it anymore. So what are they doing? They go over to ESPN and they're going to do the same thing. I mean, that's just completely unacceptable.
Well, let's face it, John. The only way they're going to sell a pay-per-view is to put Pacquiao on it against Crawford or Lomachenko.
Well, right, but they're not going to sell a pay-per-view with Crawford, Horn, and Pacquiao and Mike Alvarado.
No, you got to feed Pacquiao to one of the two. And I'll tell you this: it would be good business to feed Pacquiao to one of the two. And the reason I say that is a lot of casual boxing fans don't realize Pacquiao's old, and they'll buy that fight, and then they'll see Lomachenko or Crawford, and then maybe you can win some fans over that way. I mean, it's been the tried and true tradition of boxing from Rocky Marciano against Joe Louis to Ali Holmes, and we've seen this millions of times.
Oh, yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that for about the last 2 to 3 years, and I agree, I thought the same as a business strategy, I haven't disputed it. I think for the last two or 3 years, there's been no doubt that Bob Arum's wanted Manny Pacquiao to get in with Terrence Crawford, but Freddie Roach and Pacquiao himself don't seem to want it. Now, here's what I think. I've followed the sport long enough that I think I get it, though, and it's not at all good for the fans. I think the way they're going to lure Pacquiao into doing it now without telling the fans, and that's where this ESPN pay-per-view garbage comes in. Basically, you're going to fleece the fans by telling Pacquiao behind the scenes, hey, look, Manny, here's the deal. We're going to overpay you for Alvarado by making it a pay-per-view with Crawford Horn on the top of it, and then you'll get your other payday when you actually fight Crawford on pay-per-view. And with those two paydays, that'll make it worth your while to get in with Terrence Crawford and get blasted out of there, and that'll be the end of your career. And the torch will be passed to Terrence Crawford, and Arum will try to have Crawford be a welterweight guy that he's trying to compare to, guys like Errol Spence and Keith Thurman. I mean, I think that's the plan, but this giving mainly garbage matchups on ESPN already. I mean, let's face it, they haven't been giving anything competitive for the most part. And then all of a sudden we're already hearing about this ESPN pay-per-view, and not because it's going to be even money fights that it's led up to, that it's going to be more mismatches. This is the whole problem with boxing, is that, along the lines of what we're talking about, what they're trying to do is put a belt on every fight with a guy that they think is they just kind of anoint as their cash cow, and they keep trying to run the guy out there with as many mismatches as possible with a belt on the line and get the TV networks to buy it. And that's the way they're trying to make money. I don't think that's the maximum way to make money.
Because I'll tell you, John, I think the way to do it would be to show those two fights back to back on free TV. And then if you want to have a pay-per-view, then have them fight after that.
I agree with that. Now, the mistake is, and I think it's a huge mistake, is that you had, and I think all three of us have agreed on that, you had, because as we know, Top Rank didn't plan it. Top Rank and all of us thought that Pacquiao-Horn was a mismatch. And then it ends up being a very entertaining fight, and it gets 5 points. I don't think anybody was picking. You were picking Pacquiao by KO, if I recall.
I was picking Pacquiao by KO.
That was my recollection. We'd have to go back and listen to the show.
We could go back and listen to the show, because I'm pretty sure that I told you guys. Am I right here, Jeremiah? That don't be surprised if this is a lot tougher than everybody says.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't know.
The show says.
I don't know. We'd have to go back and replay that one, because that one's kind of tough for me to remember.
Yeah, because John Rasponte was on with us, I think.
I don't know if John was on. But again, whatever the show's out there somewhere. So whatever the show says, it says. But 5.5 million viewers, that was great. But what I'm saying is, to me, that was just Aaron fell into that. That was typically all the mismatches that he's been feeding out there. They got lucky with an entertaining fight, and 5.5 million people watched it. And that would have. Then I thought, okay, a rematch a few months later on ESPN again. I mean, you had people like Aaron Rodgers, which was tweeting, they were complaining about the decision, but still was tweeting about the Pacquiao-Horn fight, all these other, sports figures and celebrities. And, that's the kind of stuff boxing needs, frankly. And then nothing gets followed up with the rematch. We get Horn, Corcoran, which actually got a surprisingly good viewership at 6:30 in the morning. So it shows you the potentials there with some of these fights. And then we got a surprise because nobody was picking Rigondeaux going in against Lomachenko, and that fight started pretty late in the East, but that got a surprisingly good rating. And there was a New York Times article that said that was actually somewhat favorable to boxing, where it was saying that the NFL, ESPN's got to pay like $5.61 a viewer for their NFL coverage, and when they had like Horn, Pacquiao, and Lomachenko, Rigondeaux, they were paying like $1.08 per viewer, and ESPN got very interested in that, obviously because they're a business, and paying $1.08 a viewer or $5.61 a viewer, all of a sudden they have interest in boxing, but it's going to still get ruined with the matches that Top Rank's giving them. Just all these mismatches, and that's why I will continue to rail about this, because I think it's all going to go bad if it keeps along the lines of the way it's going.
Yeah, but I don't see anything wrong with a Horn Crawford fight. I see something very wrong with a Pacquiao and whoever, especially if it's Mike Alvarado.
Yeah, and at least Horn. But Horn Crawford, if it's going to be all right, at least on ESPN, I think, they're both legitimately, you rank 8 divisions, they're both top 10 welterweights at this point, and you rank 17, they obviously both are. So,
and Crawford's never fought at welterweight, so it would be real unfair to just throw him in with Danny Garcia or one of those guys too.
Yeah, I don't think it matters, frankly. I think that you got guys as good as Crawford, because he was at 140 pounds, then whether he's going to be at 140 or 147, it's not gonna make a significant difference in the way he's performing. He's been knocking guys out at 140 pounds. So if he was going all decisions at 140 after being at 135 or something, you might be alarmed. But to me, that doesn't matter at this point. He's right there. If he fought Errol Spence tomorrow, the fight would probably be close to even money with the odds makers without Crawford ever fighting a guy officially at 147 pounds.
Jeremiah?
The only thing I want to talk about with Crawford actually is not related to the fight itself, because I think you guys again hit the nail on the head. If Pacquiao decides to fight Lomachenko or Crawford, either way, he's going to lose that fight. And, I agree that it's a torch passing moment. The only thing I wanted to bring up with Crawford, and I was going to save this until the end, but since we've talked about him at length here, this is another reason why the alphabet soup organizations are shit. Okay, so Terrence Crawford last night was on Twitter. It was yesterday sometime on Twitter, and he said that he has still not received his belt from the WBA after his win. And I'm shaking my head at this stuff because he's certainly not the first guy who's ever who's taken a long time getting his belt, right?
We had somebody on like a year ago, Jeremiah, that hadn't got their belt and it had been like a year since they'd won it. You remember that?
God, who was that?
I don't remember.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to see if I can remember that one, because I do recall that, but it's just putting a face to the conversation itself. Man, if we've had so many guests on here, it's I'm trying to think, but if you remember, just go ahead and interrupt me. But this is just another. Why? We're talking about Terrence Crawford, who is arguably the best fighter in the world, and the WBA, who they throw all sorts of stupid trinkets around, guys fighting on lower level fights. But Terrence Crawford, they can't seem to put their belt around him. I don't know what's going. I don't know what's going on there. But again, it's the WBA. And again, it's just a typical madness that we see time and time again.
All right, let's go ahead. And the last fight we're going to talk about that is happening May the 19th over in the UK. We've got an IBF featherweight title between Lee Selby and Josh Warrington. And I think this is a really good matchup. I'm a big fan of Selby. I think he's a really good boxer. What's your take on this matchup, Jeremiah?
Well, I think this is a big fight in the UK. This is one that people over there have been clamoring for a while now. And it was one of those things where they had to wait for Warrington to kind of prove that he was near that level. And I don't think he's on that level.
No.
The path to get there is he's not been beating a bunch of killers to get there. I think he beat an even more faded Martinez. Trying to think of his first name, but he beat an even more faded Martinez than Quigg and Frampton got to. But this is a big fight in the UK. It's going to sell really well. Warrington has a big, strong following. It's kind of like Ricky Hatton's following, where Warrington's this blue collar guy. People are singing songs. It's very much a soccer atmosphere whenever he comes to fight. And it's cool to see. I love the fans. They're far and away better than any American sports fans that I've seen. Again, I saw Ricky Hatton fight Jose Luis Castillo at the Thomas and Mack Center in Vegas, and I was highly impressed by just how motivated, just how enthusiastic they were about everything. Where American fans are pretty reserved, but it's a solid fight. The problem is it doesn't do a whole lot for me because Lee Selby, he's been a top 5 featherweight for, years now. And he just hasn't fought against another world-class opponent. I don't think Warrington does that. Warrington is not a guy I think who's going to I just don't see him being good enough to hang with Selby. I mean, first off, Selby is not a big puncher, but I actually think Selby hits harder than Warrington. Warrington is very much a pressure fighter who has to wear you down, and oftentimes he doesn't wear you down, but he overwhelms you with volume.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing that interests me about this fight, Jeremiah, because I haven't seen too many guys attempt to fight Selby that way, and I want to see how Selby responds, and it wouldn't surprise me if he stops Warrington later in this fight.
Yeah, well, I think that very well might happen. Warrington he's a good pressure guy, and he's going to bring it. That's what's going to make the fight semi-exciting. But I don't look at him as one of those guys who's good at cutting off the ring. He doesn't have a real good jab. You know, that's what you see about Golovkin, which makes him so good, is he'll jab you and then he'll cut off your avenues of retreat. Warrington does not have a potent enough jab to do that to Selby. Selby is longer, he's leaner, he's quicker, his jab is superior. I think he's going to outbox Warrington pretty handily. I mean, I'm going to pick a decision because both of these guys are not big punchers, and I think Warrington's got big heart, but I see a clear decision victory win for Selby here.
Oh, you just reminded me I got to make my picks for Bob Day's World Boxing Prediction League, too.
Oh, damn, those aren't due until Friday, right?
I think sometime Friday, but Bob always uses the UK time, and that confuses me.
Yeah, it messes me up too.
Yeah, they need to get on the same time zone as us. It just confuses everything. There's no reason for that. John,
and they need to use our measuring system.
Yeah, definitely. That centimeter stuff's crazy, and I never know how much a fighter weighs if he's a heavyweight.
Yeah, 8 stone, 10 stone. I don't even know what the hell that means.
Yeah, I don't have a clue. And as many times I've watched that, it looks like I'd figured out by now, but I haven't because I'm a dumb American. John, what's your take on the fight?
Well, what I don't like about the fight, and I never like fights like this, and I think it's good matchmaking in the UK because of where the guys are from, but it's bad matchmaking if you took the countries away from the guys because it's two guys with very low KO percentages fighting, and I never liked that. And that's where I've always felt like, at least in the heyday, of course, in American boxing, for the most part, that would just be considered bad matchmaking, and that would be a fight that wouldn't intrigue American fans because, if you have Selby fighting a guy that brings big power, then that's interesting. Selby's a good boxer. He's a legit top 5 featherweight, whether you're ranking 17 or 8 divisions. He's a good fighter, but he's a low KO percentage guy. So generally, in your rules of matchmaking, unless this was like a linear featherweight title bout, in other words, where Selby was clearly the lineal champion and Warrington was some big contender, then you would have the fight. But otherwise, you wouldn't be looking to make a matchup like this. But with the regional angle, in the United Kingdom, they feel it's a seller. Somehow Warrington is in Transnational's top 10 at featherweight, in 17 divisions. I'm not sure how he got in there. He's not in the rings. But really, what level is Warrington really on? I mean, how would you match? And again, Selby's good. I think Selby would have a chance at outboxing a lot of the other legit top 10 featherweights guys. We know better, he'd certainly have a chance against guys like, I don't think he'd be able to handle Russell. I think Santa Cruz would be too much for him, but he'd certainly be competitive against guys like Frampton, Mares. I think Oscar Valdez is overrated. Joseph Diaz Jr., Selby'd have a shot against somebody like that. He'd certainly be able to probably handle guys like Cuellar and Quigg and some of these other, featherweights that we're more familiar with. But I just don't see really, again, except for this regional angle where Warrington fits in. And like I'd said on our show in recent weeks, I think Selby is a talented guy. He's got kind of an Americanized in a good way boxing style, even though he's not a puncher, but he's a slick boxer. He throws punches, and he's got good hand speed. He's a good fighter. I think that his time to be in a big fight, I know Jeremiah's talked about this before, and I agree with Jeremiah on that. His time to really have that big matchup is kind of passing. It's just been too long. He hasn't really been in with the upper level of opposition, and Warrington's not going to give him that. So what I think is kind of going to be a shame with Lee Selby is over, let's say, the last 2 years to 3 years, he would have been an interesting matchup for some of these guys. And I think to his credit, I think he's campaigned for that, but he just hasn't gotten those fights. And he came over and he fought over here, I think, with PBC, which I think was a good move for him, but it just hasn't got to the next level. And even if it's a big fight in the UK, I just don't think this Warrington fight does that. And I think that's what's kind of a shame for Selby, is that the months and years are passing by, and he's not really in with another, real true top 10 type guy even. And, sooner or later the abilities just stagnate no matter who you are. And I think he may be headed for that by the time he gets in with a bigger name.
Yeah, I think this is something where as soon as this fight's over, if he wins it, they need to put him into deep water to see if he can sink or swim.
Yeah, I think he's needed that for a while, and
yeah,
I think he's the guy that needs that as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think he's a guy that I think can compete with anybody. Now, there's a few guys like Russell and him. I don't think he can win. I don't even necessarily be close, but I don't think he's going to get really blown out by anybody.
No, I don't see that either.
No.
I agree. I think he's good enough to be competitive.
All right, Jeremiah.
No, and I actually, real quickly, I think that I wouldn't mind him watching Selby paired with the winner of Oscar Valdez and Scott Quigg. I actually think that would be an ideal matchup for him because the whole Frampton, Santa Cruz, Mares thing that just feels like it's going to be bundled together for at least a year and a half because. Now we got to wait for Mares and Santa Cruz to fight a rematch, which nobody really needed. And down the line, people want to see the Frampton-Santa Cruz third fight, though Santa Cruz people have been pretty wary about going to Ireland, though I don't see why they – I understand the concept of hometown judging and it's a real thing, but it just doesn't happen in the UK. It doesn't happen just in Ireland. It happens in the United States as well. Seen that plenty of times here. So seeing as Frampton and Mares and Santa Cruz are it just feels like they're going to be tied up for a little while. I think after this fight, Valdez and Scott Quigg, whoever wins that fight, I think they should fight.
Yeah, I would actually rather see Frampton fight, or not Frampton, but I would rather see him fight a guy like Santa Cruz, Frampton, Russell. I just want to see how good he is. I know what you're saying, so that's probably the best that's going to be left for him.
Well, yeah, and I want to see Russell Jr. in against anybody. I mean, Jesus, This guy's career has been borderline ruined.
Well,
I mean,
as John said,
he's fighting some.
That's going to kill him. I mean, especially with Russell because he's a highly technical fighter. It's not like he's a guy that's Joe Frazier that's coming in and knocking people out with one shot.
Right, yeah, he relies a lot on his hand speed, and that's not something that's going to get you through fights forever. I mean, and Russell he's a damn good fighter, and I wouldn't doubt his chances against Frampton or Santa Cruz. I think he's right up there with those guys. But if I'm not mistaken, from what I heard, I don't know if this has been officially lined up, but he's fighting some no-hoper again, and then the plan is for him to fight Jojo Diaz. So this is what we're doing with Russell Jr.'s career. We're giving him some no-hoper, and then the big matchup in a year's time is Jojo Diaz. Come on, man. We got to do better. I mean, Russell Jr., he goes out and gets whipped by Lomachenko, who's in his third fight, and then it's just been he's had an annual fight, one fight per damn year, and he's not even fighting top-level guys either. I mean, he beats an old Johnny Gonzalez. They've really messed his career up, and it's an unfortunate thing because you see this pretty frequently with American fighters, and I don't want to place the blame solely on the managers or the promoters or the fighters because a lot of times this is there's a lot of different dynamics to the relationship because it could be that Russell Jr. is just lazy, or it could be just it could be that the promoter's not doing his job, the manager's not doing his job. I don't know for sure, but we've seen this with far too many American fighters recently. I mean, you look at the Durrell brothers. I mean, a lot of people thought Andre Durrell was going to be a one of the top super middleweights. Well, look at the way his career's gone. Look at the way Anthony Durrell's career's gone. Gary Russell Jr., Demetrius Andrade. It's happening time and time again, and these guys are not maximizing their potential, and it's to the detriment not only of the fighters but of the fans. These are guys who can legitimately compete with some of the best the world has to offer, and we're not seeing it.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap the show up. Are we going to do a live show after Saturday night's fights? You guys want to or not?
I should be ready. Should be ready to go. I know I'll be watching, despite the fact that we've got Rosito, Gesta, and Linares as the main event. So I'm always ready.
Well, hopefully I'll find a link to watch Briedis and Usyk. So make sure after the fights are on HBO this weekend, right?
Yes.
I've learned that the fights I don't want to see the first half of the year on HBO, and the fights I don't want to see the second half of the year on Showtime. But, all right, guys, so make sure you catch us approximately 10 minutes after the HBO card Saturday night with Inside Boxing Live. Also, next week we'll have Super Bowl week, where we will have a show every night centered around the Super Bowl. Our first show will be next Monday night. We'll have former New England Patriot Mark Edwards. He was the starting fullback, huge part of the Super Bowl 36 win, upset win over the Rams. So we're going to have him in the show, and we're going to do it a little differently. We're going to actually talk about that season, but we're going to talk about maybe the weeks leading up to the playoffs, the 2 weeks leading up to the Super Bowl, and exactly how Bill Belichick prepared his team for that game, as opposed to maybe some other people do, which also to me is kind of interesting because that was Belichick's first head coaching job with the Super Bowl. And, of course, we've got Doug Peterson with Philadelphia the same way, and just kind of compare and contrast. And I think that game comes down to whether Doug Peterson's willing to take a chance to win, which as we saw Jacksonville wasn't last week and Atlanta wasn't last year. So we will have a special guest. We'll have some Eagles guests. We'll have some Patriots guests. So make sure you check us out at 9 o'clock Eastern, Monday through Saturday next week, leading up to Super Bowl 52. Boxing Legends show later this week, Virgil Hill. We're still waiting on a date and a time. We've been touching base back and forth. Jeremiah's hoping for Friday. Right, Jeremiah?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, I'm a sucker and I got a day job, so got to try to work it in.
But not on Friday. So hopefully he won't get back to me
Not
on
on
Thursday
Fridays.
and he'll ask for Friday. So make sure you check that out. Tomorrow night, another edition of Indiana Basketball Weekly with 1981 national champion Steve Risley, number 34 on the 81 championship team. We'll be on air after the Indiana game to discuss that, so make sure you check us out live there also. But we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for now. Remember, you can hear everything on iHeart, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for John Einreinhofer, Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.